Hey folks, we are here with our third of our three summer webinar series webinars. And so we're going to be talking about establishing rhythms of planning. I know a couple of you told me you really wanted this content, but you couldn't be here today. So I'm recording it for you so that you can watch it later. So last month we talked about building momentum with thematic goals. And really that led into what we're going to talk about this month, which is establishing rhythms of planning. Because once you've set some time-bound goals, you can use that to build momentum as you integrate planning into the rhythm of your year. And so we'll jump right in. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat more, schedule a call, talk about how this applies in your context. But we'll begin with the question, like whenever I bring up planning with people, they tend to say one thing, planning. Who's got time for that, right? Ain't nobody got time for that. So what keeps us from planning most often is it feels like we're so busy doing the work that we don't have time to plan for the work. But what happens over time if we fail to plan is like over time uh, we begin to lack the planning necessary to execute well. So at the end of the day, really, it's like who's got time for planning? Well, the real question is who's got time not to plan? Because if you're not planning, more and more things will creep up on you, and you'll begin to fail to execute well. So, like a lack of planning creates fires and failures that can disrupt our strategic success. So, the best plan in the world, the best idea, the best vision, the best goal in the world, if we don't embed rhythms of planning along the way, can be disrupted by all the things that were unforeseen. So when we create goals or we set a plan, it's normal that we're going to have disruptions or faults along the way. And so rhythms of planning are what's going to keep us clear and focused on the things that we feel called to do. So in order to do that, what we need a planning system that feels complementary, not additive. And this is one of the things I'm always saying to teams and leaders. It's like, I know it often feels like you already have so many meetings. How can you bring planning into it? Because it feels like if we add planning on, all we're going to be doing is meeting. And what I would say is like one time we got to the end of a planning session, like a multi-month strategic planning session. We had all of our goals on the board, and one of the people in the room said, "So you're telling me we have to do this in addition to everything else we do?" And I said, "No, you should do this instead of everything else that you do, because very often we have meetings or rhythms that are taking up time, but they're not actually helping us to envision and execute well." So you may have lots of meetings and you may feel like you have so many meetings already that you don't have time to plan. What I would propose actually is that you should leverage the meetings you already have for planning. So what we need to do is refocus our typical meetings. So here's our typical meetings. If you're a church leader or you lead in a mission-based organization, that's most of the folks that I work with. If you're in a typical church or mission-based organization, you tend to have a few standing meetings. There's usually like a weekly staff or leader meeting. There's like a monthly or quarterly board meeting. And then there's an annual or semi-annual. It might be a voters meeting, it might be a vision retreat with your board or staff, but there's some sort of annual, semi-annual kind of big meeting rhythm. And so those might be the meetings that we're working with. And maybe you've got like a board meeting and a monthly or quarterly staff meeting. And so there might be two meetings in that middle section or something like that. But generally, this is sort of the structure a lot of people are working with. So, what I would say is you don't need to add planning meetings to those. You just need to make sure you're leveraging those meetings to plan appropriately, to look ahead and prepare for what needs to be done and what needs to be our focus. So that weekly meeting ends up being like having a tactical focus, focusing on execution and how we're getting things done. Those monthly or quarterly meetings end up having a strategic focus, helping us zoom out and think about why we're doing what we're doing and resolve persistent issues. And then there's an annual or semi-annual meeting. We capture that, like if it's a big voters meeting or maybe a vision or like a annual retreat, we use that space to think very big picture, think visionary. So uh, I developed this way of thinking when I read a book by Pat Lencioni called Death by Meeting. So in his book, he's talking about how to make sure we don't experience death by meeting, how we can experience productive, fruitful, engaging meetings. And in that book, he proposes four types of meetings. So Lencioni is typically writing to a business context. And so he represents these four types of meetings for the typical business context. So if you imagine people working together in an office on like deliverables and products that generate a profit. He's talking about these four kinds of meetings. And so there's a daily check-in. That's a stand-up meeting, 5 to 10 minutes, where we talk about what is everybody working on today, and we figure out who needs help. There's a weekly tactical meeting, which he says should not have an agenda. You just do a lightning round where everybody kind of brings their issues to the table, and then the facilitator of the meeting makes the agenda on the fly based on that lightning round. And it should be 45 to 90 minutes. If a topic comes up that we can't resolve in 45 to 90 minutes, we park it for the next type of meeting, which is a monthly or ad hoc strategic meeting. So what we're doing is in that weekly tactical meeting, we're only doing what we can do in 45 to 90 minutes to make sure everybody has what they need to keep moving forward, to execute. Um, and then if something comes up that we can't resolve in that 45 to 90 minutes, it populates a bank of topics that we're going to use in a strategic meeting that happens monthly or as needed. That's the ad hoc part. And so what that means is maybe in your weekly staff meeting, you have topics that keep coming up that are disrupting your ability to get through that meeting in a timely fashion. A lot of folks, when I tell them that we're keeping that weekly meeting to 45 to 90 minutes, they chuckle because their weekly meeting goes at least 2 hours, but that's usually because they're getting sidetracked into conversations that come up again and again, but never get resolved. So what we're going to do is in that weekly tactical, when those things come up, we're going to push them, we're going to put them to the side. We'll have to acknowledge that verbally and ask people to suspend on that topic until we can give it the time that it's due. So then in that strategic meeting, what we do is we take 2 to 3 topics at most. I find two is a good number of topics, and we block 2 to 4 hours to make sure we can wrestle them all the way down, get them completely resolved. And so Lencioni says, oh, sorry, I said 2 to 3 topics. He says 1 to 2 topics. And so we're giving them plenty of time because remember, these are the issues that come up again and again, but they never get resolved. The strategic meeting is where they will get resolved. So we deep dive into critical issues for long-term success. We mine for conflict. We try to get everything out in that setting, and then we navigate that meeting to make sure we get them all the way resolved. That's in the monthly or ad hoc strategic meeting. And then Lencioni advocates for a quarterly offsite, which is a 1 to 2 day kind of thing. And again, in a mission-based context, we might not be doing an offsite every quarter, but I think once or twice a year, doing an offsite sort of retreat style meeting that allows us to think big picture about our mission, ministry, and objectives is really crucial. So again, I mentioned that these four meetings are designed for a business context. So how are they adapted into a ministry or mission-based context? So I've added a column to that table now for the adapted way of using these meetings. So that daily check-in, I say may not be necessary. A lot of times in a mission-based organization or in a church, your staff and your team are on lots of different rhythms. It's less and less common that you're all in an office showing up at the same time every day and you can circle up for a meeting. I will say in the church that I lead, we do a stand-up meeting before our worship service. So we all circle up and just walk through what's happening that morning to make sure we're all on the same page. That's an adaptation of this daily check-in meeting. Um, then uh, that weekly tactical, what I noted here is like if you already have a weekly meeting, it's worth noting that the weekly meeting as outlined in this system will be shorter than what you're doing now. So if you already have a weekly meeting and all you have is that weekly meeting and that's your one meeting, it's probably running 2 to 3 hours. And it probably feels like you wish it were done before 2 hours. And so what I would say is you have to start to think critically about what you're going to do to change the behavior in that meeting to make sure it sticks to that 45 to 90 minute window where it's purely tactical and you're focused on action items. And then the next thing is your strategic meeting will require more thought than you're currently giving your meetings. So this is where like if you're the key leader or you're the person who's in charge of a lot of these environments, you're going to need to come into that meeting with a clear plan and a clear objective. One of my favorite parts of Lencioni's book is what's identified here under the monthly meeting where it says format 10-minute hook. He talks about how the person who's facilitating the meeting is giving a quick reminder on the topics we're going to discuss for the day. How did we get here? What's at stake? What do we keep saying? To kind of bring people's mindset into the moment of what we're going to be talking about. And so that's the sort of thing where like it's a performative endeavor to lead that meeting. And so if you're used to just walking in, maybe you've got an agenda and just kind of seeing what comes up, the way this strategic meeting is handled will be a little bit different than what you're used to. And then finally, I mentioned on the previous slide, but that quarterly offsite, that offsite meeting may not be quarterly for you, it may be annual or semi-annual. But you might bring in staff and board for some of that. You might create sort of your own set of people who are in that meeting. Same thing with the strategic meeting, depending on the way that your organization is governed, you might kind of bring different people into some of those conversations. And so using a system like this, what it does for you to establish rhythms of planning is if you can block these meetings out in your year and know where they're all situated, you can have the right planning conversations in the right places at the right time. And that's the thing about planning is like depending on what we're talking about, we need more or less lead time. So like creating a new department or developing a new ministry is something we work up to for a long time. Executing the event that we execute at the same time every year might take less collaborative time, even though somebody's working on it outside of a meeting. And so what you're able to do is if you can kind of install a system of meetings and you know where those conversations are taking place when, then it just becomes a part of the way that you operate. It becomes a part of the way that you walk together, and it creates rhythms where those planning conversations are happening at the right time. So how can you focus your meetings for clearer, more consistent planning? This is something we've talked about on a past webinar, and if we've worked together at all, you know it's a clear passion and deliverable of mine is to work from a vision plan. So again, in June's call, we talked about creating thematic goals to build momentum. That's one aspect of a vision plan, but having a clear understanding of where we're going and how we're getting there becomes sort of an agenda maker for those meetings. So working towards specific goals and then using a specific set of meetings to help us execute on that. Working from a vision plan is key. Then you're able to, if you can calendar meetings early, like maybe get a lot of those meetings on the calendar at the beginning of the year, or establish the expectation of a weekly meeting, set the annual and semi-annual, and then be able to know how you're going to call for a strategic meeting when it's needed, or just build it in quarterly. And again, if you're building it in quarterly, it could replace that weekly meeting. So maybe 1 week out of 12, it's a half day instead of just the morning, something like that. So work from a vision plan, calendar meetings early, set the expectation and stick to the rhythm, and then run meetings like it's your job because it is. And this is one of the things I think sometimes as leaders we can forget is that like we feel like meetings are just kind of a necessary evil. Everything else I do is really my job. But if you're a leader, and particularly if you have a team, and if you're in a mission-based organization, you're probably working with volunteers, that's your team. then running a good meeting to keep all those people on the same page is a key component of your job. You can be really good at all the stuff that is on your job description, but if you're not running meetings well, it's going to keep you from doing the things that are on your job description. So again, work from a vision plan, calendar those meetings early, and then run meetings like it's your job because it is. Um, so if you need help with this, this is something I assist churches with. Sometimes after we've created a vision plan together, I help them kind of initiate and install a rhythm of planning to make sure they're staying on track. Often that looks like a monthly coaching call with the team leader, and then me being on site twice a year to help with resets with staff and leaders. So that annual or semi-annual meeting, I can facilitate in between. I can coach the key leader to make sure we're staying on this rhythm. It's one of the ways that I serve folks who want to be more clear and consistent with their planning and meeting structures. So again, if you want to talk more about any of this, I'm happy to jump on a call. Always, you can email me at jacob@claritynavigator.com. Or if you want to schedule a 30-minute call, just go to calendly.com/Jacob-Hoyer/CN30. 60-minute calls, the same thing, just CN60. So I would love to chat more about how to build in rhythms of planning in your church or mission-based organization. I hope we get to chat soon. See ya.